So, to sum up, we have the fun task to bring all these things together, which on the first glance do not fit really, because everybody wants the same homogeneous fleet, but they want the operational flexibility to do everything, so it doesn't exist in one aircraft. Then we want the most innovation. Unfortunately, innovation has a certain development cost, but we don't really like to pay anything. So we try to bring all these elements, which I just put there in conflicting contrast against each other. We try to bring them into one, and that then leads to, with the assessment which we did on the previous points, that leads to an aircraft recommendation, including our market requirements. So with that, I like to focus, I'm not focusing on, there's this choice of wording, it's play with words you could say. I focus on modern fleet rather than on young fleet, because the young fleet per se doesn't say anything. It's the question of how you specify it, how you look after it, and how you fly it. So if you keep it modern, that's the key to successful fleet management as well. So with that, I just dumped a lot of information, thoughts, ideas on you, and what I'd like to is, I'm sure there's millions of questions which will crystallize eventually, so maybe I get out of that million a couple already. Yeah, I'll start here and I'll make my work on it. Yeah.
Okay, short question is, what does DOC stand for?
Direct operating cost.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if there's a Lufthansa specific.
DOC is direct operating cost, COC is cash operating cost, and the only difference between the two is cash insurance. Yeah. That's the only things which are different.
That was the easy question.
Thank you for leaving that in. I feel much better.
Airbus recently announced it would like to standardize for long-haul aircraft with 18-inch seats in the main economy cabin. And we've seen a trend where the past few years, as much as 90% of new airplanes coming from another manufacturer have been in the 17, 75
something,
range. I'm curious what your thoughts are both on Airbus's announcement. I haven't done the measurements yet. I'm not quite sure. Maybe Airbus can't fit 17 point something in, and that's
you indicate probably the right thing.
I did preliminary measurements. I couldn't see how they could do that, so it might not work anyway. But I'm curious what, as a customer, your take is in terms of all the issues you discussed that are relevant to choosing an aircraft strategically.
I think, well, we run a couple of cabin seating scenarios, and I'll just put this. The seat widths. Yes, we all know that there's a certain limit for at long haul where we feel uncomfortable. But let me ask you, if you take, for example, one of the current Boeing aircraft, take a 747, you sit in economy, is the seat width acceptable, provided you have sufficient pitch? So it's not only the widths, because maybe actually on the night flight you'd like to find a way that you actually stretch your feet under the seat in front of you, and therefore you may prefer actually the pitch, because if you get that much more seat width, you will not do this at night.
Yeah, but passengers are also becoming bigger in many markets.
And people become bigger, yes, which is true, but at the same time, the seat widths is how do you use the seat widths, and let me give you a counter argument. We all heard about Airbus' idea to improve the A380, 11 abreast. That is actually much narrower than any of the Boeing seats. So I'm a little bit, we look at the various seats. We have our seat, what we call seat clinics, where we invite our passengers to come to our mock-up center, which is close to Frankfurt, and they sit in those seats, and there's no names on the seats, there's no manufacturer or which aircraft those seats would stand in, just rank those seats by comfort standards, by amenities, how the table is, how the pitch is, how the seat cushion is, everything. And therefore, like standardizing on the focus on 18-inch or so, we cannot see that. Sorry, yeah, Karen?
So when you were talking about the importance of reliability and avoiding disruption, so how does Lufthansa Group, when you're sort of making these fleet decisions, work with your Star Alliance partners to ensure that same level of reliability and lack of, or minimum disruption across the entire network?
We have a couple of groups in the fleet planning area where we work together with our Star partners when it comes to specification, certain requirements which we put onto the manufacturers, so that the aircraft specification in many cases is actually pretty similar, even though airline A may have a single class layout, airline B may have a 4-class layout, but that's just the visible part. Like the operational reliability is depending more on the hidden values and of the specification. And that's where we work closely together and exchange a lot of data within the Star Alliance. I need to, I'll make the round, I'll come back to you.
You mentioned the various stakeholders that play a role in fleet decisions. And if that group is at 100%, how influential is Lufthansa Technik on that 100%?
Well, the first step is always like 2/3 roughly of our business is, or close to 2/3 to 3/4 is airline business. The rest is logistics, or cargo, is Lufthansa Technik, and is catering and all the other elements of the system. So the first element is we cannot buy an aircraft just to please Lufthansa Technik, because if that makes the airline uncompetitive, it doesn't help us. So the focus is we need an aircraft, we need an operational asset, and if we come like, if we have two things which are extremely close, yes, they could tip the balance, but only if it's extremely close. And when I say extremely close, it's like really extremely close.
Your last slide where you showed the 747's reliability going up,
Yeah.
even though it's aging, that is clearly an output from Technik that enables that.
Yes. So these things go in, but Technik could do that with all aircraft. If I would have given them, we have the same numbers on A340-300s, it looks the same. So that there's no difference, why should I go for the Airbus or for the Boeing? Because the Technik expertise will apply for this to both aircraft types. Yep.
Yes, two questions, please. You talked about the different eras of airplane manufacturing, pilots, engineers, commercial, and we're in this economic, ecological stage now. So you're buying aircraft 25, 30 years out. What do you perceive, and I realize the future isn't here yet, but what would you suspect the next phase will focus on? From where we're at now, focusing on ecological and economical issues to...
That will stay. We will gain a little bit more structural efficiencies. And I think in terms of the design, the question comes whether we can change some of the aerodynamics. But again, will that happen in the next 10 years or 15 years? No. Will that happen in the next 40, 50 years? Yes. Because it takes a lot. I mean, the stakeholders, I forgot the airports, for example, if you look at a Canard style design, that means that all the airport designs worldwide needs to be changed, because the Canard would just block the passenger jetty getting onto the aircraft. So it's a small item, but the question is, how much would the Canards bring to the system compared to how much does it cost to modify all airports worldwide?
Thank you. Fuel costs have been very erratic and very high and really have dampened profitability from time to time. We hear talk about alternative fuels and that kind of thing. What do you see in the future in that area?
I think Lufthansa is part of the committed airlines to adhere to the ICAO and IATA goals in terms of the reduction of carbon emissions. Looking at the alternative fuels, we have a very simplistic view, which is it has to be a drop-in fuel because we know that there's a transition period, and therefore it has to be something. Today we fly on that fuel, tomorrow we fly on that fuel. That's drop-in. The other one is it needs to have similar calorific values, like burn characteristics need to be relatively similar. Because let me take you one step apart. If you wanted to have a hydrogen power, yes, it's very efficient on the aircraft. Unfortunately, the tanking volume you need is probably on the top of an A340, you put an A380 for the tanking in order to achieve a Europe to Los Angeles or something in that vicinity. So that really doesn't make sense. Then the properties in terms of inflammable and everything doesn't work. And last but not least, it is an alternative fuel, but is it better? Because like today I could say the power for this thing comes out of the socket. So I just worry about that one. But yeah, but for example, is that power produced by water, solar, wind, nuclear, or coal? And for hydrogen, you need a lot of power to actually create the hydrogen. So we look at the total balance of what that fuel gives. We have run a test on biofuels, real biofuels, and the test on those biofuels was a drop-in. By coincidence, it had a slightly higher calorific value, so we actually reduced consumption by 1%, but that was a side effect. We really wanted to prove the concept, so we had one A321 flying between Hamburg and Frankfurt for about 6 months, like 50% on biofuel. So one engine ran on biofuel, and we looked at the engine, we tracked everything, and yes, I know there have been plenty of single flights, but this is the only test which has really lasted for 6 months on a scheduled service. And then at the end of that, we still had enough fuel left at the end of the test. So we decided to put all that fuel into a 747-400, which flew from Frankfurt to Washington. Obviously, on the way back from Washington, it took normal kerosene. And so we finally validated all those things. We like the biofuel, we like the alternative fuel, but the total energy balance is better than what we get today. So just doing a sequestration or using a lot of energy to produce something, it may get me independent from some oil-producing countries. So military, for example, has more of that in mind when they use different fuels. But when we look at the airlines, what we want is something which is sustainable, which gives us actually a real reduction in the CO2 emissions throughout the chain.
Thank you.
You said that seat flexibility obviously is very important in the ability to add slimline seats, which most major carriers are doing. How low can you go with these seats? Can seat manufacturers pull any more weight? Can they scallop any more off of these seats? Can you add any more seats to these aircraft? Because it's getting very, very tight in these cabins right now. Are you doing anything along the interior side?
In terms of type, I think we're more or less, we're basically there. But in terms of the weight of the seats, never say never. If you would have asked me 10 years ago, I would have probably told you a couple of kilos or pounds is fine per seat row of 3 seats. Again, today we're at half the weight of those seat rows in those days. And I still see new material research that could actually lighten the seats even further. So we could lighten the seats. Do we actually reduce the pitch anymore? I think we have used all the elements of tilting, seat cushion, having the reading pocket on the top, therefore not obstructing your knees anymore. So we have done most of that. But again, there's 2 elements. One is what happens in front of your knee or your bones just below the knee when you want to stretch some other seat in front of you. And the other one is obviously the seat back in front of you, which comes towards you. And those things, I know there's research still going on, but at the moment I think we have reached a certain level where work. In any case, you look at the exit limit. The current seats which we have are really the exit limits of most of the aircraft. Because the 320 has an exit limit of 180, and you don't even have to go to 27-inch or anything. You can reach the 180 seats with 29-inch pitch.
Thank God for that.
Well, we share the same.
Just as a follow-up question, flexibility when it comes to in-flight entertainment is also very important. And Finnair recently announced that they weren't able to even have the option of ordering A350s without embedded IFE systems. Would you like to have the option now of being able to take aircraft with wireless systems instead of the embedded, or at least on the road?
We have, this is one of the things we've been working on. Lufthansa Technik actually has a wireless entertainment system, which we're testing, because that gives us much more flexibility. And this is one of the things where we use and leverage also the Lufthansa purchasing to actually push some of those things into the basic specification with aircraft manufacturers. So I know about the Finnair problem because